Franklin D. Roosevelt once said, "Real estate cannot be lost or stolen, nor can it be carried away. Purchased with common sense, paid for in full, and managed with reasonable care, it's about the safest investment in the world." And real estate is what we do. This is the Realtors Radio Network. There's no sense in overcomplicating real estate. And if you're a first-time home buyer, an investor, or a real estate agent, you're about to get useful, practical, and smart advice on every facet of real estate. Welcome to the Realtors Radio Network. Now your hosts, Santos Garcia, Marcos Suarez, and Don McCullough.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Realtors Radio Network. How are we doing today?
Excellent.
Good.
Fantastic.
Really excited to dive into today's episode. Today we're going to talk about investments. So I have a lot of new purchasers that been asking me questions on how do they get into the whole investing and how can they build wealth in real estate, right? And since both of you have many years of experience, what are some of the things that you're looking to a property when you're thinking investing?
So I would probably, if you're a brand new investor, let's say, the first thing you should focus on is what everybody already knows, right? Location, location, location. Always look at that first. It's your easiest thing to assess. You know if you like the area and it's going to be different for everyone, right? Because your comfort level is different than mine. It'll be different than Dawn's. And so you have to assess that for yourself. Your realtor can't tell you that, because what your realtor is comfortable with doesn't mean that you're comfortable with that. So it's up to you. The location is first. Make sure that you're comfortable with the location. Would you feel comfortable going there at 8:00 at night to go collect the rent? The first or second or third of the month, if that's how you're going to do it. So that's one of the first things that I would assess is the location for sure. And let's say you don't have time to go there that day. The advantage that you have of these days is you have Google, right? You can go dive right down to the street view and see what that neighborhood looks like. You always want to pay attention to when that picture was taken or that because it could be from 3 years ago, 4 years ago, depending on the area. Google doesn't update their maps every single month for you. So,
but still a pretty reliable source. I go on Google Maps for it. That's like the first thing I do.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So that's one of the things, right? Location is one of the things. If you know that you don't have time, maybe it's the middle of the night and you want to go on Google and look at that, that area from the comfort of your own home. Go on Street View, go take a look. I would zoom out a little bit and see, what's on the other side of the block. See, are there a lot of empty lots there? Are there any burned down homes? Or, depending on the area, is there a park nearby? You can start to assess the area and figure, okay, some people, I don't necessarily go by this, but some people say, well, is there a Dunkin' Donuts nearby? Is it walkable, right? Are there sidewalks, on this property? Some neighborhoods don't have sidewalks, so the walkability score is not going to be that great. But so you want to look at things like that because, for future value, you want to know that the walking score is good. If you happen to be in one of those towns where, you have a great center of town where people like to shop in their own town, maybe go eat in a restaurant in the local town. So you want to zoom out a little bit, see how far these areas are, and then consider, is it strictly for short-term tenants? Is it for long-term tenants? Is this a neighborhood where the turnover isn't that high, which will be good for you because you have steady income, things like that. And then you want to look at, maybe consult with your realtor and find out what are the rent values, what are the rents going for in that neighborhood, things like that. And then you start to get into some of the other more complicated things about real estate. But I would say consider the location first. Walk the area. You're not going to jump into anything, immediately, right? And you're not going to buy something the next day if you decide today that you want to go out and become an investor. You want to take that first week, look around, make sure that you're comfortable with the area, maybe even look in 2 different towns and see, what the advantages or disadvantages are. Are there trains in that area? Are there, things like that where, okay, it'll be an easy 30-minute commute to the city. It'll be an easy hour commute if you know that everything's an hour away. Do you have a train station? Do you have a bus stop? Do you have things like that that are good for your particular tenant? What would be the advantage of a tenant visiting you, in that particular situation?
It's interesting that you say that. So when we talk about, walk score or things like that, or more just the convenience of things, you have to assess the audience, right, with your location. So are there laundromats nearby if you don't have laundry facilities available for each tenant? Because
Right.
that's something that's
Yeah.
pretty important for tenants. Are there grocery stores nearby or convenience stores, or like you mentioned, sometimes local coffee shops? We're in northern New Jersey, so commuting to New York City is very, very important, especially in some particular towns. We know that the general audience that's moving in is going to want easy access to New York City, whether it's trains,
Right.
park and ride, things like that. So I look at that at all times, no matter, even if it's not a New York City commutable type of town, you think about, who is my audience going to be? Who am I going to be renting to, right? Are they going to have cars? A lot of people that come from New York City to our area, they don't drive. So the ease of getting around is important, of convenience.
Sure.
Is there pharmacies nearby? Are there quick shop, like quick grocery stores and things like that, where they can get all the things that they need and then get off to work real quick, right? Because let's face it, in our area, there's people that are just renting just to have a place to sleep at night, and
Right.
they're not there all day.
Right. I mean, I've looked at properties even as far out as Indiana, Illinois, where you may not even have a town very nearby, but you might be out in rural areas where you're lucky if you have a bus stop that passes by your street. So you want to make sure that wherever it is that you're investing, that you're close, that you're within proximity of somewhere where there are other rentals, so that you can assess the value of rents. If you're renting in an area, if you're getting a 2-family home, in an area where there's primarily single family homes, it's going to be a little bit tougher for you to figure out what the right rent should be for that particular home. So the more the better. If you see a lot of 2-family homes in the area that you're buying, and you happen to be buying a 2-family home, great, because it'll make things easier on you. Plus, that people generally want to rent in that area.
Yes.
You have a history.
And a lot of people are chasing those multifamily units, but can you make money with single families?
Absolutely. There are, in fact, I hold a few single families. They generally get treated a little bit better. People feel like it's really their own home, so the tenants tend to treat the home a little bit better. There's a little bit of pride of ownership, if you will, for them to because they realize that they're the only ones responsible for keeping that
Yeah.
home looking the way it does. In multifamily homes, you find that the tenants are like, well, I don't know if they're supposed to be picking up after themselves or if I'm supposed to be picking. So no one does it because they figure somebody else is doing it. So if you're smart, or if you have some kind of room in your particular income that you're looking to make for this particular property, if you have room there, you'd want to give a discount. This is what I do. I give people discounts for living on my first floor units, and I have them take the garbage out. Maybe you do a snow cleaning, which this year they're getting a free ride because
Yes.
it
I have
hasn't
to knock
snowed.
on wood real quick, because we
Yeah,
haven't
knock on
really
wood.
had any snow.
Well, now it's going to snow this week, by the
Of
way,
course.
just a little bit.
Just because we talk about it, right?
right. So so you give somebody a break so that they can clean up after, maybe even mow the lawn and things like that. And then this way you make sure that the property is being looked after, even if you're not there every single month.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that. So single family homes are great rental properties, right? But the one thing I think that you have to focus on, more particularly on single family homes, is if you're in an area where it's mostly owner occupied, right? And then you rent it, you want to make sure that you've got really great tenants that are keeping up the curb appeal and everything, because they get singled out a little bit by the neighbors, right? They're like, oh, they're renting, so if one blade of grass is out of line,
Right.
Yeah.
they could start complaining. So they're great rental properties. A lot of prospective tenants would love to get in a single family home, right? That's kind of their leap into home ownership.
Right.
You're going to have more responsibilities as a tenant if you're renting a single family home, like you mentioned, with the lawn maintenance, snow removal. You might be paying for water, where in our area with multifamilies, typically it's included.
Right.
But it's a good leap into, am I fit or am I ready for home ownership? So tenants do love to have a single family home to kind of
It prepares them.
exactly.
It prepares them. They have the right idea as to, oh, I could see myself doing this for myself. I'm already doing this, maybe with a little bit extra sacrifice, maybe an extra $200 or $300, I can get myself all the way to being a homeowner instead of a renter.
Or it could do a little bit of the opposite, where somebody rents a single family home and they say, you know what, especially folks that we get that are working in New York City and, they don't maybe have all that much extra time. They might rent a single family home and say, you know what, a condo or a townhome where I'm paying an HOA fee and somebody else is doing the upkeep is more, fit for me. So it's good for landlords, right? In a way that single family homes are very, very desirable for rental properties. They do generate a higher income. Expenses might be a little bit higher, but for a tenant, it's a good test drive of, is this for me? Could I see myself taking care of my own home?
Right.
Great rental properties for relocations, right? So if you have people coming and get a job relocation, they already own a single family home, or at least in my experience, this is kind of what I've had, is large corporations relocate a tenant, they relocate their employee. They already have their home that they're going to rent out in whatever state they're coming from, and they want a single family home here.
Right. I think so. Once you've found that, okay, I like this town, I like the location of this particular street, which is a very smart thing to do, by the way, is make sure that you drive these streets. Whether you're looking to buy for yourself to rent out or buy for yourself to live in, you want to drive by the street first, because first, people forget that buying a property is not, a process of selection. It's a process of elimination.
Yes.
So you have to eliminate the areas that you don't want to. So one of the ways is you drive up and down those streets, make sure that you're comfortable with that environment, with that street, and then you figure, okay, I found the property. Now what? So now you found the property. Now it's your job to make sure that that the exterior of it, right? Because you're assessing. Okay, I'm here standing in front of this property. How's the roof? What are the expenses going to be for repairs? What is my down payment going to be on this particular property? What are the rents like? For this particular property versus what I want them to be, right? Because if they're not what you want them to be, then what are they, and then what do we need to get them up to? And then you want to make sure that your realtor or whoever you're working with gives you the information of what are the leases like? Are they up? Are they month to month right now? Are they coming up soon? Did they just get locked into a 1 or 2 year lease? What's the situation there? Before you make any offers, before you do that, you want to know these details, because it'll determine whether this property is profitable for you right away, or is it going to be profitable 2 years from now when the leases are up? Maybe you're going to, and maybe you just decide based on that alone that, hey, this property isn't meant for me, because I don't want to be in the red for 2 years before I start, getting into the better numbers.
And now that you mentioned a property being profitable, without going really too deep into details, what are some of the things, or what is the formula that you use to figure out if a property is profitable for you?
Right. Well, the first thing you want to make sure is, is it profitable already? That's why you want the details up front. Is it profitable already? Why are they selling? Is there something wrong with this property? What are the repairs going to be? Because as much as I know that, I know that this, I like this house at $150,000. I like this house at $350,000.
Where is that $150,000?
Whatever. Well, I'm just throwing out numbers.
I want to buy
let me
it
know.
right
I want to
now.
buy it.
Yeah. But well, you can, if you go out in the middle of the country, you'll
Sure.
find those.
Sure.
But whatever this price is that you find yourself that you would like this house at, is it actually profitable at that number just because that's the number that you like, or do I get it at this number and there's still $100,000 worth of repairs to do? Because there's a difference. It's still going to set you back 15 years before you see a profit if you buy something at $350,000 that you thought was great because the rents are $2,000 on each floor. And you figure, okay, wait a minute, the rent is $2,000 on each floor, but it has $100,000 or $150,000 worth of repairs to do. Then what's the point of buying that property? Because it's going to take you 20 years to recoup that money. It's just there's a lot of. Now, can you get that $350,000 property for $250,000? Then yes, it looks great.
Yeah.
If you look at rough numbers, but if you want to look at it from from that state of, is it worth getting into? Then you want to think about, is there equity, right? Can I, and what determines that? Is it there's equity? It's worth 350. I can pay 350,000, but it's worth 400. So I got it at a discount. I got equity in it right away, or is it worth 350,000 and I'm paying 350,000, but all right, can I negotiate and get it for 330 so that I can have an instant equity of 20,000? So you have to determine the equity part of it. Is there equity now, or can I get equity by buying it at a discount? This way, there's some room in it already. The other thing that you want to think about is, okay, is there maybe I can only get it for 350, right? And its value is 350, but can I force equity into it? Can I force appreciation, right? Can I rehab it a little bit or repair it a little bit so that it appreciates anyway? That's, of course, a forced appreciation where when you're repairing something, maybe you're upgrading a kitchen, upgrading a bathroom. Yeah. Now you force the value of it to go up. And then you're looking at it from that point of, you know what? I'd still pay $350 for it because I can put $20,000 into it, and that property will automatically be worth $400,000. Things like that.
I like that you mentioned that, because there's a lot of homes in our area that have huge attic space or basement space that's unused, or even, just untapped right now, where people will finish it and use it, depending on whatever the municipal ordinance is and things like that. But they can use that. Could be, at space to work from home.
Sure.
Or garage space that, maybe the garage is dilapidated, but it gets fixed up and somebody can have a hobby,
Sure.
Here in our area, we have suddenly a plethora of classic cars that people need to store somewhere. That could be some extra.
I've seen a lot of garages turned into gyms in the last 2 years.
Absolutely.
And office too. I see a lot of podcast offices and stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
So forced appreciation is always good, because that you can, if you have that kind of an eye, or if whoever you're partnered up with has that kind of an eye where they can see untapped potential, where, okay, if we did this here, we can add some value there. Then, obviously that's another way to produce income where, okay, it's not necessarily income right now, but there's equity. So when you're considering buying a home, you should be thinking about two things. Is there equity, and is there immediate income? So you want to have both things in mind. If you don't have one, you want to at least have the other. But if you can have both, even better. Because in the future, you can always say, you know what, I'm going to take out an equity line of credit now that I have all this equity, and go ahead and buy another property with that,
right,
with that credit line. So, but that's another day. So the other thing that you want to take a look at is, how much do I have to put down in this property to make this whole thing worth it? I'm an investor, so I have to put that 25% down.
Mm-hmm.
Do I need to put 30 in order for this to make sense right away? Or do I need to put, 40, or do I really need to negotiate it down a little bit and put that extra 5% down to get it to that number? So you have to figure all of that out before you even think of, what the income is going to be. You have to know what your comfortable number will be for that end. And then, think about how is this property compared to the neighborhood that it's in, compared to the fixes that I'm going to put into it. How is it going to appreciate over time? Right? Is the neighborhood that I'm buying in going down or is it going up? Is the work that I'm putting into the house, is that the value of that going down or going up? Am I putting it into the living room or am I putting it into the kitchen?
Yep.
So all of that, you have to consider all of that. And then you can start thinking of, and you mentioned, how do you determine that income that,
Mhm.
so one of the quick ways to assess a property, a lot of people have a 1 or 2% rule. The 1% rule is that's just really easy math. If I'm buying a property for $350,000, I want to make sure that let's say the rental monthly income is $3,500. That 1% of that. And then the numbers kind of make sense. But
And that will be before or after taxes?
well,
I mean expenses.
yeah,
Expenses.
the expenses is what you want to look at. It'll be after expenses.
After expenses.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which generally they're not going to be that much on a monthly basis. They're not going to be this huge number. But after, you want to definitely consider after. The in some cases you have to be careful there, because in some cases it actually makes sense to look at it before, because the rents are just so great anyway. There's some, especially in our market. I don't know who's listening to our podcast out there. It could be in the middle of the country or middle, but in this particular area, in the tri-state area, where the rents could be, $3,000 for an apartment, for 2, even 3-bedroom apartments, go up to $3,000. Let's say some of them are even $4,500 for a 3-bedroom. Just one of the apartments it could make,
Yeah.
That difference. So, if you have a 2-unit place and you're making $9,000 a month, just, you don't have to worry about the expenses at that point. But we should all have that problem.
Right. I'll
So,
take it.
It's called a high class problem. And so then you want to start considering, the ROI, the whole getting really complicated into that whole situation, where you start thinking about, the finer details of being an investor. And when it comes to that, then you also want to start considering, if you're really that finely tuned into that, then you want to start considering having, your accountant also take a look at some numbers for you. You don't want to be the only one involved in making all these decisions, because now you're truly a business. But if you're just buying that one time, or maybe you have 2 properties that you're going to be an investor in, then you want to start considering working with maybe a 1% rule will be easier for you to keep track of in your head. That's called the what do you call that? The napkin calculation.
Oh, right.
The back of the envelope calculation kind of a thing, where you make things really easy on yourself. Just looking at the 1% rule, you can figure out whether that property is worth it or not. Some people like to go into the gross rent multipliers. That's a little bit, it's getting a little bit more complicated into that whole realm. But as long as the location works out, as long as the property is in, not too much of disrepair, because you don't want to put all this money into it, where it's not going to make sense for no matter how much rent you're collecting, and the street, the condition of the street that it's in, the whole thing. You have to take all these things into consideration, then start considering the rest of the things that I just spoke about.
And I think one of the things, you guys have probably heard me say this 1,000 times over, does it make dollars and cents, right? So the way that I look at things also is a little bit of history. So I look a little bit back into, well, right now we're in the height of a market. Let me look back at the last height of the market and see what kind of pricing and things like that, because you don't want to overpay, especially on
Yep.
an investment property.
Right.
Different in an investment property than when it's a home you're buying to occupy is you have to remove the emotion. So you can overpay a little bit on a property that you're going to occupy, right? Because you're going to use it. And that's, if it's $10,000 more than you wanted to spend, so what? Because that's the property that you're going to live in and do what you're going to do in your own property. But when it's an investment, it absolutely needs to make dollars and cents. And you have to consider the environment you're buying in. And when I say environment, it's a lot of things. It's partially the location, partially what your expense is going to be when you're buying it, right? Do you need to take a mortgage out or are you paying cash, right? If you're paying cash, it's a little bit different when you're looking at return on investment than when you're taking a mortgage out, right? What is my all-in costs going to be monthly if I'm taking a mortgage out versus what is the rent? If I'm coming out of pocket, it's probably not a good investment, right? Unless I can see something else like, well, if I do this or that, I can maximize on the rent, and that's a little bit of a different story. But generally, you don't want to get into an investment and be coming out of pocket each month for obvious reasons, but for an important reason being that you should be able to take the surplus each month for X amount of months, whether it's 24 to 36 months, and putting it away into an account that's just for that property so that when you have repairs, let's say a roof or furnace or something like that, you can take that money from that account that's been the surplus that you've been generating every month from that account to do the repairs, and it's not coming out of your pocket. For me, that's like a golden rule. I've seen investors, perhaps maybe they see something that I don't see, but I see them going in and they're digging in their pocket each month just to make that payment. So they're collecting less rent than what their out-of-pocket costs are each month. For me, it's not an investment I would go on.
Right. And it's funny because there are a lot of investors who say, well, as long as the property pays for itself, and to some extent, depending on the area, that's might be okay. And I say a really very loose might be okay. I think that if you're a brand new investor and you have that type of mentality, I think you're setting yourself up to fail because things do go wrong on property. So I would say at the minimum you should try and have at least $200 of income coming in per door, right? They call it per door, not just per building. Let's say it's a 2-family home. You want to have at least $200 extra per apartment coming in, minimum $200 per door, because you want to be able to put that money away in case there is vacancy, right? You have to account for that. In case there's a water heater issue, in case there's a furnace issue, all these things. And like Dawn mentioned, what happens if there's a problem with the roof? You need an extra 8 or 9 or 10 grand to put out. You want to have it come from somewhere, not from your pocket, from some account that you have set up, previously for that particular property. So I would definitely always have that fund, that emergency fund coming from its own, from that own property. So minimum of $400. If it's a 2-family home, minimum of $400 a month coming in. If you could have more, it's even better. Obviously some of us have some properties who just barely make that $400 or $500 a month, to some that literally generate over $2,000, $3,000 a month. And that's great, if you can get it. But not all properties, that's not realistic to expect a property to make you over $2,000 a month if you're just starting out as a new investor.
For a new investor that is buying his first property, would you recommend to walk into the deal with the reserves just in case an emergency happen, or it still makes sense to just try to get into the property and then just build that emergency fund slowly? What do you think?
If you're an investor and you're walking into something and you don't already have reserves, then I would tell you not to be an investor yet.
It's making me that's making me shrink in my seat right now.
Right.
Because I'm thinking about, so you always have to think about carrying costs,
Right.
and vacancy rates, right? So if when clients come to me and say, they want to buy an investment property, I try to find out what kind of investor are they, right? Are they the hands-off, I just want to collect money every month and I want this cream puff property that's never going to require any maintenance. I'm not going to have to do anything but collect that check.
And then you tell them to go work with somebody else.
Well, you know what
It's
I would say? So I have a very good friend of mine, wants to become an investor, and goes through the whole thing, and he's exactly that. He wants the cream puff investment. And you know what? I told him, you should actually buy a condo, right? and rent it out.
Tell him that
So
Marcos is looking for the same thing.
yeah, well,
Me too.
yeah, but
I have
so,
some research
so
ready for
he's
that.
not making a ton of money each month, a few $100, but guess what? All he does is collect the rent checks. All the utilities are included by the HOA, and it's the best investment property for him. He just kind of stuck his toe in the water, and he loves the investment part of it in that respect. So it's a condo. It's less than a half a block to the New York City bus. It's a great investment property for him, right?
I like condos too. Don't get me wrong. I like those. They're half the price of a 2-family, right? If you just figure on per door, it's the same thing. You're just you're just buying a door. Half of a 2-family.
So he also bought a single family to rent out, but in comparison between the two, he said this single family gives me a headache every single month.
Yeah,
they're late on the rent. There's a roof leak. There's this. There's that. They didn't shovel the snow. Now they got a city violation. All kinds of stuff. But it just depends on who you are. What do you have? What resources do you have? Are you a contractor? Do you have a family member who's a contractor that can fix things up for you? And you're not paying a fortune? Or what kind of person are you? Is it your first investment property? I actually love condos for investment properties. There's not a huge return, but it's a safe return. They don't appreciate the way that single families and multifamilies do, but it's a safer bet. So it's kind of like in the bank. Do you put your money into a money market or a CD account and it's maybe a little bit lower return, but it's the safer return, or do you throw it in the stock market and it can go either way? Depends what kind of person you are. So I always try to ask the client first, tell me what your vision is of an investment property.
Put it in S&P 500. 17%, you can't go wrong.
Yeah.
But, when they start to tell me I would say right off the bat, a lot of people watch these TV shows or they go to these seminars and everybody wants to be an investor and things like that. But a lot of times they don't understand what's involved in it. Who am I going to become when I own investment properties?
Are you going to be a slumlord, or are you going to be a good landlord?
Exactly. But
and it's funny you mentioned those seminars. I was going to talk about it. A lot of people show up to these things not realizing that what they're actually there for is to be sold on something else, not necessarily to become this great investor. They're selling you a tape, right? They're selling you some kind of video that they want you to watch, or they're selling you an extra class that you want to go to. That's how that particular speaker is making their money, off of you buying those classes that they're now having you. It's
and we always know when they have them because we get a million phone calls
right.
about our listings, and the question is asked right off the bat. What's the ARV? What's this? What's that?
Yeah, you know when those seminars are being had in the area, because all these realtors start getting all these phone calls from would-be investors who now, I have this fund that I can draw from, or I have this letter that it's hard money. You ever hear of hard money? I'm like, are you kidding me? It's
it's really cash. It's really cash.
It's really cash. Yeah. It's or I have a friend who's looking to buy, and I'm just looking for them. I'm scouting it out for them. You always know when these seminars are happening, and they're just selling you on something else that has nothing to do with what you're actually trying to learn. But it's you just have to be careful, with your money. It's still an investment, right? It's not monopoly money. You think about it. What if you lost it because you mismanaged that property, because tenants walked out on you because they all have the impression that you're not really looking to make it a good living situation for them. And then what happens is, instead of going for 1 month of vacancy, you're up to 6 or 7. Can you afford to carry this property? If one or both of those units, let's say if it's a 2-family, both of those units are empty, can you afford it?
So when you talk about that, remember how I was mentioning, to put that surplus every month away into an account to build your reserve up,
Right.
enough so that not just for repairs, but also just in case you do have a vacancy, right? Because you don't want to be dipping into your own funds to pay for this investment property if you can help it. We couldn't say that none of us have done that in our in our investment careers. It happens, but you live and you learn from that, and you don't want that to be the future of your investing, right? You want the properties to pay for themselves and any incidentals with it.
Right. I agree. And then you want to consider, if you're getting a little bit more advanced, you want to consider cap rate, things like that. You want to go over that?
Yeah. So I would say, when we talk about cap rate,
Capitalization rate. Sorry, I
right.
keep
So
abbreviating.
when you talk about cap rate, and I would say, even though some may disagree with me on this, I would say that would be more for multi-unit and or commercial properties.
Right.
So if somebody comes to me and they want to rent a condo, not that cap rate doesn't apply. It's just that you're really going to look at it when you have multiple income streams for that particular property.
Mhm.
So it's basically your rate of dividing the operating income by the value of the property, right? To
By
find
total
out what
purchase
your
price.
annual return is going to be on that property.
Right.
Everybody wants the highest return possible. So do I. So if you guys have anything with an extra high cap rate, let me know.
Right.
But we have to be realistic in thinking about how much can the property generate in income. And when I say how much can it generate in income, I mean right now. I don't look at, well, it could generate this if I do that, right? So somebody comes to me with a property and they say, do you have an investor for it? It has this extra large lot next to the house, and you could rent it to this school bus company, and they will rent it for $200 a month. But that's not guaranteed. So I'm not going to take that into my calculation, right? And they disagree with me on that. But nobody should be making those decisions based on, of course, we think about what could we do with this property? How much more income could it generate? That is true. But we're not going to pay more on what it could generate. You're going to pay on what it is generating.
Right. Your reputation isn't built on something you will do. It's based on what you've already done. So, you can't base things
Very
on...
well said. That was very well
Yes.
said.
Yeah. So thank you. So you can't base it on future value. You have to, what is, right? What exists now.
So that's
So-
something to really, really understand, because a seller will 2,000% disagree with that.
Of course. Because
They
they're...
will say, well, you could do this, and you could knock the property down and put a hotel on it and get, or
Right.
whatever. Like,
Right.
I actually recently sold a 3-family home, and my seller said, but it could be this and it could be that. And but it isn't.
Yeah.
And no one's going to pay you triple the price for what it could be.
Yeah, and if your aunt had, well, I won't get into that.
But yeah, I mean, it's so when I look at the rate of return, it's really, really important for me to understand. And even if it's an area that I'm not familiar with, you better believe I'm going to contact a realtor who knows that area, who's going to be honest with me and let me know exactly the value there, what's going on in that market. Is something changing there for the better or for the worse, right? Are they overdeveloping? Or whatever they're doing? For me to understand that and look at the formula and look at the rate of return and see, does it make dollars and cents?
I censored myself there. I was going to say,
Thank you.
If your aunt had a set, she'd be your uncle. But you can't.
Let's keep it clean.
Let's keep it clean.
But it's just a just another way of looking at things, right? So cap rate, great, but that's getting ahead of yourself. That's way into the multi units.
So for that new investor, right? So you have the location, you look at the property, completely makes sense. You jump into the deal, you have 3 reserves. Now you got the property. So when is the right time, like, to get maybe a property management company, or would you even recommend getting a?
I would
management
say
company?
You want to get into that once you've had at minimum of 3 properties. You can handle yourself right now. If you didn't have you're a property owner, but I'm saying to the general public, if you didn't have a property and you went out this year and got one, you could manage that home and probably another home on your own without needing someone else. Maybe after your 3rd or maybe even 4th property, then you could consider having somebody manage them for you. But I'm pretty sure most people can handle even 4 themselves.
And I also think, just to add on to that, it also depends who you are. What do you do? Right?
Absolutely.
Is this what if you are a Wall Street guy who's working in the city for 12 hours a day, you're more likely to need a property manager sooner than somebody who this is what they're going to do for a living.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So, or does somebody own a business where they can also step out whenever they want or whatever and manage their properties? So it could also be, do you have any partners with you? Right. So if you have a partner between 2 people, you can probably manage a few more properties than if you go at it alone.
I agree. Great.
Okay, so I guess this is the end of the podcast.
Yes.
So thank you for making it to the end. This is Realtors Radio Network signing off.
Keep an ear out for the next episode of the Realtors Radio Network, where Santos Garcia, Marcos Suarez, and Don McCullough share their wealth of real estate knowledge. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, review, and share. Find us on social media at Realtors Radio Network. See you next time on the Realtors Radio Network.